this is for your review on your Flash review. So first thing you do, you're going to insert a new symbol, and we're going to call it a bird. It's going to be super simple, okay? In symbol edit mode. You must use the line tool. You must go to your property inspector and increase it to at least a 15. The reason being is so that whenever you ask it to move, you can actually move it because you'll have something to grab onto. It's like a husky bird. Now, if you hold down your Alt Option key, that's going to pull the point down. We're going to just, and then release your Alt Option, and I'm going to click my curves here. I've got a bird. In frame 10, I'm going to put a keyframe. In frame 20, I'm going to put a keyframe. So my bird is going to go up and down, kind of like the McDonald's M. Now, if you'll notice, these are dots. Even though even though my bird is a symbol, according to this timeline, this is not a symbol. We're just going to ask you to do a simple shape tweak. I'm going to click in frame 10, deselect, move the body up, move the wings down, and this has to be done with the line tool and not a brush tool. Then I'm going to ask it to shape tween, and I'm going to ask it to shape tween. So whatever's in frame 1 has to be the same thing in 20, so that when it loops, then my bird is flying. Okay? So now my bird is done. I'm going to name this layer bird. My bird is going to go from one corner, take it from the library, drag it to the stage, resize it. I'm going to have it go from one corner to the center in 80 frames. So what am I going to put in frame 80? Keyframe, drag it to the center, make it smaller, hold down my shift to maintain proportions, and ask it to motion or classic. Classic. We do not motion. Classic, please. So now it's going to go in the center. If I want to see my bird flap its wings, remember you're not going to see it unless you do a command return. If I want to see it on the stage, I just click the keyframe, click the symbol, go to my property inspector and say, hey, don't act like a movie clip, act like a graphic. Then, and it'll tell it to loop. Then you can tell it, hey, do that. Now, while the bird is, if you happen to accidentally twist it down, this might happen. It's not doing it. Here we go. Your bird might, if you flip it, it might look like it's on crack. So if that happens, you right mouse click, you clear your keyframe, put the keyframe in there again. You're going to get dots if you've asked it to do a motion or a classic and there's not a keyframe at the end. That's why that happens, because it needs a keyframe F6. It's got to have a keyframe at the end. Dots means that it's broken. So when I resize it, try not to go do this. Stay up here. Make it smaller. Now, I want it to fade out in 10 frames, so I'm going to put an F6 keyframe there. And I want it to fade out from here to the center. So I'm going to click the last keyframe once. Selection tool, click the symbol on the stage. Property inspector, color effect. Now I can put that down to alpha and alpha that out to 0. Now it's going to fade out from here to here. Okay? If I didn't have that keyframe there, it would start fading out from all the way at the beginning, but I don't want to do it. I want to see it here. Remember, controlling the timeline is all about keyframes. Now my bird is gone. Lock it, make a new layer. Next one is for our sky. Okay, let's pretend like Hooked on Phonics worked for me and that spells sky. I'm going to tell no stroke, because we're going to do another shape tween there. And then we're going to use the rectangle tool. Now, I want you to do a linear gradient. So to get a linear gradient, click your swatches here. Instead of a solid color, I'm going to say, hey, I want a linear gradient. And it's going to ask you the colors. Well, I'm going to double click here and say, like maybe I want a red. And then here, double click, I'm going to say go yellow. And then I'm going to go ahead and add an extra color here, make it a bright orange. So this is going to be my what do you call that? Sunset. I'm going to draw a rectangle the size of my stage. Okay. I need to rotate the gradient. So if you remember, behind the free transform tool is your gradient transform. Click, and that little circle here will allow you to rotate. And then here you can push that gradient in or push it out. Now I've got a sunsetty color, right? Now, in the last frames here, I want my sunset go from daytime to nighttime. So I'm going to keyframe and keyframe. Now, in this last keyframe, I'm going to tell it to change color. So I go back to my linear gradient and say, no, go ahead, change my color. So I'm going to do a black, and I'm going to do a blue situation. And this one, click, hold, and drag. That'll get rid of that. That'll pull that up. And now I've got a nighttime. And if I want to rotate, I think I want to rotate that. Okay. Now, if for it to go from here to here, what am I going to have to do? Is it a classic tween, shape tween, or motion tween?
Motion tween. Shape.
It's a shape. If you put a motion or a classic, you're going to screw it up and you can get tweens in your library. Shape tweens cannot be symbols. We did not convert anything to a symbol. It has to be a shape tween. Well, that's so funky.
That's weird.
Not digging now. That's okay. I don't care. All right, so all that disappears. My sky is done. Lock it. The last thing I want you to do is put some text in here. Okay, T-E-X-T. And the text is going to say, and so it begins. I don't want the text to show up until frame 80. So I'm going to put a keyframe in there first by F6ing it, insert a keyframe, and then I'm going to use my text tool and property inspector, change the color. Some of you ding-dongs are going to use the wrong color. Type in and, so it begins. Dot, dot, dot. And I want it in one line. I don't want it in two separate lines. And I want ellipse, and I want you to capitalize the first letter and not these others. This black is nice, but do you see how it's dark? We're not going to be able to read that. So you be sure you choose a color that we're going to be able to read so that there's some contrast. Do not put your text to the very edge in Flash. And those of you who've taken video know that this is an unsafe zone. You kind of have an imaginary rectangle here. So be sure that if it goes outside that, it's a possibility it could get cut off. So let's make sure that it's not on the very edge. I'll count off points for that. So I've got my text. Next, I got to convert that to a symbol because in order for do a fade in or fade out, it has to be a symbol. So convert to symbol. What am I going to call it? I'm going to call it text. Now it's a symbol. I'm going to put a keyframe every 20 frames. F6, F6, and then one more time at 40. My background needs to stay. Do I F5 or do I F6 on that?
F5.
F5. Tell it to stay on the stage. Now here we're just going to classic, and then we want this to fade in. So click in the first keyframe, click the symbol on the stage once, go to your property inspector, alpha to 0, so that it fades in. It's going to stay, and then we want it to fade out. So which frame are we going to have to click on it to tell it to fade out? 140. Keyboard shortcut people, click that first keyframe, hold down your Alt Option key, click, hold, and drag. That's an automatic copy and paste. Now that's done. So now we got the fade in, fade out. That's it. When you're done, raise your hand, and I'll come and grade it by your machine.